a week. I teach statistics and math at a large university in the East. After 5 years, I now have tenure with the university, which has really relieved me of a lot of stress. It would be an understatement to say I'm intelligent. It only took me that long to graduate from college. I was carrying a double major and couldn't take my eyes off the girls at the age of 17. After completing my double doctorate in 2 years and working for the government for another 2 years, I made the decision to leave before I blew my brains out. It's understandable why nothing ever gets done in government. All I ever did was elude bureaucracy until my uncle finally gave up. I seized the opportunity as soon as I learned about it. However, after 3 years, I came to the realization that only 1% of my students actually paid attention to what I was teaching, and the other 99% either needed the class to fulfill requirements for their majors or used it as a filler to maintain their grant status and be classified as full-time students. Throughout my first 2 years, I dreamed big. I planned to produce a large number of math teachers who would then instruct their students and so forth using what I knew. But that didn't endure for very long. They went to the dean when I failed 75% of my first semester classes in my 3rd year. I had grown weary of assigning grades based on a curve that awarded it to students who were only obtaining 50% correct. I drew a line in the sand because I was sick of my students cheating, sharing test questions, and generally showing no enthusiasm. I was asked to explain myself when I was called into the dean's office. "Do you think a cheater deserves anything better than a F?" I inquired. "This school has no room for cheaters, but are you trying to tell me 75% of your class cheated?" "No, just 50% of it." Less than 15% of the remaining 25% correctly answered the test. I demonstrated to him how I had given a different test to each row, but everyone had written the same answers. To ensure that there would be no duplicates, I rewrote the exam the previous evening. Since the test was open book, I assumed that the participants simply copied the answers from a source without even looking at the question. They lost, and I prevailed. But 3 of the students I failed were football players, and they had to work extra hard to meet their minimum school sports requirements in addition to their scholarship requirements. My classes turned into the ones that students hated to love. In the first day of class, I told them that I would no longer be giving quarters. "You possess an option," I would inform them. "You can either study or fail, there are no other options." By the 2nd week, I would usually lose about half of my students. The midterm grades for this semester were the best they'd been in a while. Perhaps, I thought to myself, I'm beginning to get to them. I shoved them, and to my surprise, they challenged me and pushed back. When it came time for finals, I made the decision to throw them one last curve by giving them an essay for the test. Everybody turned to stare at me. "You can write a 500-word essay explaining the features and application of one of the 3 topics listed on the board. You've got an hour." Most people didn't submit their papers until the very last minute. For the first time in a long time, I felt good, and it seemed like everyone else was too. 9 o'clock in the morning. Someone entered my office while I was grading papers. "Mr. McKinnon, do you have a minute?" "Yes." "Is it not Deborah?" "Yes," she said, perched in the chair in front of my desk. "It's me, Deborah. What can I do for you?" "May I just ask what kind of idiot assigns an essay for a math final? I can understand a multiple-choice question or a true-false question, but a final essay?" I reached for my gradebook, more than satisfied with my return. "Deborah, you got a high B on your midterm," and her final caught my attention. It was blank. "I don't understand. You didn't write a single word. Didn't you understand the question?" "Dennis, isn't it?" "Yes," I nodded. "No, Dennis, I didn't understand what you were asking. The entire semester, I never once cracked the book. Hell, I never even purchased the book. I do not comprehend." "How, then, did you perform on the midterm so well? How did you deceive?" "I didn't cheat. The test was easy." I closed my gradebook. "Let me be clear on this. You didn't study the book, you attended every lesson, and you didn't grasp a word I said, but you received a high B on the midterm. Is that right?" "All right, so you didn't cheat. Is that all?" "Yes, that's the main thing." Returning to my initial query, what kind of idiot assigns an essay final for a math class? "Deborah," she said to me. "Debbie, I like to be called Debbie." "Okay, no problem. I believe we're almost done here, Debbie. It appears that your final grade will be a D. If I may, allow me to make a suggestion. Imagine that you replace my final exam with a multiple-choice or true-false exam. You can challenge me to the hilt, and I'll wager that I can at least receive a B. You already told me you don't understand a single thing about what I taught all semester." "That's right, but if I get a B, I get a final grade of a B, okay. Now, why would I waste my time letting you retake a final test? To begin with, you must be wondering how I achieved such a high score on the midterm given that I did not cheat. Secondly, I'll take you out to dinner and explain how I did it. If I don't receive a B, there's just one requirement for me. I must know the right responses to the first and last questions. I just need to know the right answers. You can either add 2 more questions to the test or mark them as incorrect." She upped the ante. I was about to tell her that I didn't think this would be fair to the other students. She looked at me and said, "I'll even show you the good stuff, just to add in a little sweetener." Unlike most girls in my class, she was attractive. Not to mention getting to see her chest, it would be worth it to get to go to dinner and learn how she cheated. I get to pick the restaurant. Only if you win, that is. Gorgeous, but very arrogant. It's probably time to knock her down a notch or two. Okay, I'll agree, but I'll need to make up a new test, just to make sure everything is on the up and up. Obviously, she said. Let's say 6 o'clock tomorrow night in your office. It is 6 o'clock. I'm excited about it, I said with a smile as she left. Making the 2 different types of tests took me 2 hours. I tried my hardest to make them difficult, added every trick question I'd ever heard of, and came up with a few more. After that, I added one more curve. All of the questions were false, with the exception of the first, which was true. Additionally, I reversed the pattern of B and D twice more on the multiple choice exam. I was now able to taste my free steak. She threw me a curve when I gave her the option between the 2 tests. Dennis, suppose I take both exams and receive a B on each. What if we placed a bet on an A as the final grade? You want to take both tests, and if I get a B on both, you give me an A. Okay, since we're changing the rules, how about if you don't get Bs, you take me out to my favorite steakhouse and I get to see you totally bare? She paused for a few seconds before asking, let's see, and if for a little nudity. All right, you got a deal, she said with a confident smile. Let's get this over with. I've made dinner reservations at Tony's for 7:30. After giving her the tests, she took a seat. I've indicated the right responses for questions 1 and 24. Let's just say I gave you those as gifts. I took a seat and resumed grading papers, occasionally checking up to see how she was doing. I assumed she had discovered my other gifts when she smiled. In both tests, I had submitted 2 simple questions. No point in completely degrading her. I was surprised to hear that she was done after an hour, even though I had anticipated being here until at least 8:30. The little woman was mine, so she must have given up. You briefly confused me before I realized that each test had 2, not 1, curves. I believe I aced both of them. Does this entitle me to see you? She handed me the tests and said, well, enough playing around. I'm hungry and it's time we get on if we're going to make our reservations. After glancing at the tests, I reached for my coat. Tony's, wasn't it? I spoke up after we had just made our selection and ordered a bottle of wine. How? It was your fault I did so well. Pardon me. Those were tough questions for a PhD to answer, I retorted. Well, I read the questions and until I found 2 easy ones, it was like reading Greek. I must say, you really are a nice guy. Sipping from her glass of wine, she remarked, if you hadn't put in those, we would be at your restaurant and you would be staring at me. I still don't understand how you did it. Permit me to pose a query to you. How much time did it take you to prepare for the exam? For 2 hours. I answered, about an hour and a half. Toughest test you ever made. By far. I feel honored. Debbie grinned and said, I didn't think I looked good enough to go through that much trouble. All right, let me clarify. The majority of teachers are quite indolent. They create a pattern-based test. True, false, false, true, or mix it up by performing 2 or 3 consecutively. Understand what I mean? Although I don't think they do it on purpose, that is how it appears. I'm an expert at solving puzzles and spotting random patterns, even though I might not understand everything. In true and false tests, I can typically identify it in the first 2 questions if I can get the first and next to the last, and in the first 3 multiple-choice questions. Whether they are aware of it or not, people are predictable. But my tests weren't anything like that, I said, beginning to comprehend her method. Your midterm was, but I knew I was screwed when you threw me a curve with an essay. You're aware that you have a rebellious streak. You had me completely perplexed on both until I understood that it wasn't just the questions that were different. You also arranged them in a way I hadn't seen before. That made me smile. Like I said, I was about to give up when I discovered your gifts. It dawned on me then what you had done. Either I would be completely correct, or I would be completely wrong. You could have lied and claimed that I failed and that I would not have known, but you're not that kind of person, are you? Not at all. I would never have done that, even though you turned me into a monkey. Look quick, if for no other reason than the fact that you're a nice guy, I owed you that. I can't imagine another teacher who would have given me a break so I wouldn't have looked like a complete moron answering all of the questions correctly. That's me, the enduringly kind guy, I said as I raised my glass in her direction. The majority of professors are haughty jerks who believe they are superior to everyone else. I enjoy putting them on a lower tier. I always tell them that even though I didn't work hard in their class, I still received an A. So, I'm not your first. Signs of hell. This is what I've always done. Don't get me wrong, I follow my interests, but there are a lot of things out there that they want to push on you, and the majority of them are completely pointless. Dinner arrived. She questioned, you sleep with your students? Certainly not. Well, you were going to with me. Debbie, I don't screw around for good grades. Although I've never had to do anything like that, I know others who have, so yes, a lot of other people do. Well, I don't, but it doesn't imply I wasn't interested in looking at the options. I mean, I'm a human too. I'll venture a guess. How many women have you slept with so far? 7 to be exact. And what about it? You lost your crown at the age of 16, roughly. 13, if you have to know. My mother noticed that I was spending too much time staring at the girls rather than finishing my homework. So, one evening, a young woman entered my room and, let's just say, provided me with a lot of answers to my inquiries about what to expect. Debbie sat there, nearly stunned. Dad had left us years earlier and she just figured that once I found out what it was like I wouldn't have to wonder about it and could get my mind back on what was important. She hired you a hooker. That is not at all like that. She merely knew a college student who occasionally needed a little extra cash for expenses. She took her time with me and had a nice appearance. It truly astounded me. Whoa, that is quite the tale. What now? You just go out with intelligent people and make them feel attracted to you by whispering cute numbers into their ears or reciting pi to 29 decimal places. Not quite, but it appears that I stand out a little. A young, single professor who weighs 125 pounds and stands 5 feet 6 inches tall. He is not as ugly as a mud fence. What are you? 190 pounds and 6 feet 1. You're not totally unattractive, and although you look like you're in shape, you probably don't have any real endurance. Debbie, I ran my last marathon in just under 3.5 hours. Excellent. You would have it all if you were a millionaire, attractive, well-built, intelligent, and wealthy. It made both of us laugh. The next 2 hours were devoted to getting to know one another. I could tell she was motivated because she was pursuing a degree in business and marketing. She informed me that she had 2 older brothers, and that when they were around, nobody bothered her. In other words, you got in a lot of trouble but they always bailed you out. Not bad trouble, just stupid things I used to do. All right, but from now on, just occasionally. What say you? Are you really as formal as you appear to be? I guess you're just going to have to find that out for yourself now, won't you? Now I was in her game. We exchanged until they informed us that they were closing. We didn't talk much while we drove her back to the college. So, you don't date your students. It's not ethical, Debbie, and can send the wrong message out. All right, let's head outside. Since you now know my secret, I'm done with your class and won't be taking any more from you. She said, so what? Sorry, at say 7 o'clock. And held up a piece of paper. This is my address and phone number, don't be late. I hate to wait for anything. She wasn't really letting me have a say in what was happening, but at this point, I honestly didn't care. Debbie gave me a kiss for my trouble and I walked her to her car. Maybe said if you're a good boy. I went home and had a cold shower after she left in her car. What she'd done still astounded me. I suppose she had refined her ability to the point where it was almost a science. Debbie was intelligent, but I was determined to find a test that would be impossible for her to cheat on. It was just a matter of time. After I picked her up, we went bowling. She kicked my butt in all 3 games because I had only ever gone bowling twice in my life. God, I was so sorry to lose to her. Do you like sushi, Dennis? Since I am aware of a small, remote location where it is both reasonable and fresh. It wasn't my favorite, but I could eat anything except smoked eel, which I didn't even think tasted good. Since I was still hungry despite her being full, we ended up getting coffee and pie at Baker's Square. When you're not in school, you're not half bad. After doing some research, I discovered that you are actually fairly intelligent. 180, what's your IQ? Closer to 195, I informed her. And 2 doctorates, that's impressive, particularly the statistics one. After college, I want to work in marketing, mainly in sales. If you have something that someone wants, they will buy it regardless of the numbers. I've looked at the trend samplers, surveys, and other tools they use these days, but ultimately, it comes down to what's popular, how much it costs, and whether or not the customer can afford it. And if the person is a teenager, they will, if they really want it, find a way to get the money. I listened as she spoke, imagining what she might actually look like. I told her I had a great evening, even going bowling. I kissed her on the cheek and said, we'll have to do this again. Finally saying to myself, I'll call you, I turned around and headed back to my car. God, I wish I could see the expression on her face with eyes in the back of my mind. She gave me a call on Thursday afternoon when I didn't. I thought you were going to call me. I was, but got tied up with posting grades and doing the prep work for the next semester, but that's all finished now. Good, maybe you'll be able to make some time for me now. Thought to myself, she's taken the bait, give her a little line before setting the hook, a lesson my dad had once taught me while we were bass fishing. Maybe I could prepare dinner for you on Friday night. If you'd like, we can watch a movie after we finish our Mexican food. That sounds fantastic. Please accept my cordial and bottle of sangria. Do you require anything more? Nope, just yourself. I stopped on the way to her place and bought a pack of 6 condoms. I reasoned that I would be screwing myself over by not having them if I got lucky and she wasn't taking the pill. Dinner was enjoyable, particularly after my second beer helped me relax. My maximum was 4, but I took a cab after 3. A professor could not afford to get a dwy. After cleaning up, she had her 3rd glass of wine and I reached for our 3rd beer. I was getting a bit sleepy from the bad movie. She said, don't fall asleep on me, I have plans for you tonight, as she turned off the DVD player and planted a kiss on my lips. I want to see how a genius makes love to a woman. Grabbing my hand, Debbie showed me to her bedroom in the back. She threw the comforter off the bed as we undressed together. A bed of water. I didn't think they made free-flowing waterbeds anymore, but she had one. I collapsed onto the bed, creating a sizable ripple, and observed Debbie perform a backflip that nearly threw me off the bed. Are you not in love with it? You're in for a real treat if you've never made love on a waterbed because I can make it warmer or colder. Relax, Deb, we've got all night, don't we? As long as it takes, lover. I assumed leadership. We had a really good time. All right, I answered. All right, perhaps better than usual. Not until round 2, I hope. Debbie put her warm mouth on me before I could say anything, so I didn't have to worry about cleaning up. Just lie back and let me do the driving. In that car, she did me a dirty job. When I did wake up, it was around 8:30 in the morning. I was going nowhere because Debbie was still asleep and completely engrossed in me. I made up my mind then and there, considering the entire night I'd spent with her. I was eager to learn much more about her. She was attractive, but what really captivated me about her was that she was intelligent, could adapt to any circumstance. Not many men could even lay claim to that. She began to move at 9:30, and at 9:45, she opened her eyes. "Morning, love, how did you sleep?" "Like a log," I grinned. "See, I told you, it's the water bed." "Well, I think you also had something to do with it. This morning, there's someone with foul breath. Let's go take a shower, please." I've had 24 years of showers, but none quite like that one. Simultaneously, I got my first massage in the shower. I was clean inside and out by the time she was finished. Since Deb had likely awakened the other residents of the building, or at least her 2 roommates, I, the gentleman that I am, returned the gesture. We talked, ate, and made love for the most of the evening on Saturday after spending the morning in bed. I was sorry to have to leave on Sunday, but Monday morning work needed to be done. Deb left me completely nude at her front door. When I attempted to bid her farewell, she chuckled and threatened to keep me from leaving until she was satisfied, which might take the entire day. Back in her bedroom we went. That was the beginning and the end of it until Christmas. Christmas Eve, I went to her family's house, and the next day, we had dinner with my mom. Mom drew me aside and inquired about the severity of the situation. I held the ring up to her, following a wonderful romantic encounter that evening. "If we get it pierced, this ring would look great, unless you want to wear it some other place." Before I even asked, she let out a scream and said yes. It was the most wonderful Christmas ever. Debbie was hired by G&K, a prestigious marketing company. Based on the ages of the upper management, she conducted her routine research and discovered that there would be a turnover in approximately 5 years. Enough time, she believed, to leave her mark on the company. She was motivated, perhaps obsession would be a more accurate term. She put in more work than any 2-person there, and I felt that they took advantage of her by piling on the workload. She didn't mind, but her long hours and out-of-town travel started to bother me. Debbie's late nights at the office began to form a pattern that was hard to ignore. One evening, I decided to surprise her with dinner at her office, hoping to mend fences. When I arrived, her office was dark, but I heard her laughter echoing down the hall. Peeking around the corner, I saw her leaning close to a colleague, their intimacy unmistakable. The sight cut deeper than any argument we'd ever had, confirming my worst fears. Debbie had found solace in someone else's arms, and our marriage was just another casualty of her relentless ambition. We had discussed having a family, but Debbie felt it would be easier if we put it off until she became manager, which she felt would happen within the next 2 to 3 years. We therefore practiced a lot. I made sure I could always make it to that dinner or this party. I was popular at most events since I wasn't a dummy, which led to a brief rift between us. "Dennis, you can't monopolize the conversation the way you do. I can't get a word in edgewise." I comforted my worried wife, saying, "Honey, I'm just responding to their questions, that's all. From now on I'll watch it, okay?" I kissed her, she smiled, and everything was well once more, until I made a foolish mistake at a social gathering. Even those from the home office were present. I was gregarious, polite, and the kind, encouraging husband on his wife's arm. I met up with some of the top brass from the home office after going to get her a glass of wine. One of them spoke about marketing research and how it's always accurate after the introductions. I simply repeated what Debbie had always told me, opening my mouth and inserting my foot, since I had heard her thoughts so often. "I suppose everyone who said you were a genius was correct. Perhaps Dennis should be the one to receive the promotion rather than his wife." It didn't go over well, but I really tried to explain that's what my wife always told me. I guess they thought I was just trying to make my wife look good. Not at all satisfactory. "Dennis, why don't you just shoot me in the eye to end this right now? You've just ruined my chances of being hired for that job. Everyone now believes that you are the creative force behind every concept I have developed over the past few years. Carl, my boss, even asked to run a few ideas by you for your opinion. It got worse from there on out. She gave me the finger for not getting the promotion, and all she did was glare at me when I brought up the family situation. Our weekly dates increased from 3 to, at most, 1. Debbie's hours worked were the only thing that went up. She worked on this proposal or that one in the den if she wasn't at her office. The fact that I was no longer invited to any of the social events made me unhappy in particular. "Are you ashamed of me now?" She was wearing her best for a function when I asked. "No, I just can't afford to lose another promotion to you." I said I was sorry. "I apologize." "How in the hell do you know that I apologize? You cut me off at the knees in less than 10 minutes, even though I worked hard for 2 years to earn that promotion. I told you to keep your mouth shut, so why didn't you do that?" All you needed to do was be the big guy and add my 2 cents. They gave it to Tom, who I had trained, though. It's true that I handled the majority of his work for him. She now yelled at me, so, if I'm not sympathetic to you, I'm sorry, excuse me all to hell. I have to go, if that's okay with you. I'm going to attempt some damage control and the big wigs will be present. Avoid waiting until after midnight. I had never witnessed someone so enraged. I believe that she didn't arrive home until after 2. After that, I avoided her like the plague. Since this was a college town, I found something else to do if she worked nights and weekends. I made friends with some young academics and their assistants. We would occasionally visit a downtown nightclub and a couple of bars. I was having so much fun that I knew there would be no warmth back at my shrew, so I didn't want to go there any longer. Ellen was a recent addition to the economics division. At the age of 28, she stood at approximately 5 feet 10 inches and weighed approximately 150 pounds, all of which were lean. She had a habit of playing with a part of herself that I found fascinating. I was baffled by this, though. Over the course of a month, we grew close to one another and occasionally went out for dinner or drinks after work. Where is your spouse right now? Why don't you ever include her? I told her the condensed version, omitting all the profanity. I hate to say it, but I think she's right. How long has it been since you did something that made her look bad? About 8 months since the party and she hasn't forgiven me yet. Considering what you did, that is pushing it. Even though I would have been upset, I would have moved on by now. For the love of Christ, it's only a job, not your life. Would you mind explaining that to my wife for me? I laughed a little as I asked. Not for the life of you. You have to sleep in the bed that you made. It seems like you're only doing that in bed as well. She was accurate. I arrived home much later than 10. I was far from drunk because I'd only had 2 drinks. My former loving wife's evil twin greeted me as soon as I entered our home. Where have you been and why didn't you pick up when I called you? I noticed that I had missed 3 calls from Debbie when I checked my phone. It wasn't even on vibrate, and I never once heard it go off. What were your desires? I came home to an empty house and wanted to know where in the hell my husband was. Why? She bit me back. What the hell do you mean why? You heard me, so why were you curious about my location? Do you even care why? It's foolish of you to say that to me. Since you are my spouse, I naturally want to know where you go when you're not around. I never try to follow you or find out where you're going. In fact, now that you bring it up, I doubt I even care. I turned my back on Deb and walked away, not sure if she was seeing shock on her face or sadness or anger. I heard nothing but silence from her, not a single scream, shout, yell, or even call out my name. I proceeded to our bedroom, got dressed, cleaned my teeth, and retired to my own bed. That was, I believe, the first time. In our waterbed, I woke up by myself. That bed was beginning to grow on me. It was cozy when 2 people slept there, but when I was by myself, I kept sinking. After getting dressed, I thought I would see Debbie downstairs, but she had already left. Even though I knew she didn't sleep with me, I stopped caring at this point. I will not put up with her nonsense any longer. I shifted all of my personal belongings and clothes into our spare room after work. I was barely seeing Deb anymore, and I was no longer bonding. She said, "I'll be late tonight," and she called me on my mobile. And I'm meant to give a damn. Would you mind spending the night with whoever you are currently sleeping with? That won't be as noticeable this way. She hung up on me. Ellen and I had drinks and dinner. I believe Debbie is in a romantic relationship. She informed me that she would be late, and I told her that I no longer cared and that she should just spend the night with her partner. Wow, what did she say? She just hung up on me. She might not be having an affair, as you are aware. Based on what you've told me, she might just be a workaholic, which can occasionally be just as bad. Has she received that promotion yet? I have no idea. We don't discuss her job as much as we used to. I understand why. Why don't you two take a seat and attempt to solve everything? I know you had a wonderful marriage based on what you previously told me. I believe the word "had" is appropriate. I'm fed up with having to pay for a dumb claim that any reasonable person would have discounted. However, you're right, the days of sniping at one another are long gone. I'm still young enough to have the family and loving wife I've always wanted. I looked directly into Debbie's eyes as I said, if not with her, then with someone else. After our dinner, we danced in close proximity to one another and put Debbie out of our minds, at least for the evening. On Saturday when I came downstairs, Debbie had already started her morning meal. Wonders never end, you still reside here, even though I wasn't sure. Is there any coffee left? A whole pot. I took a cup and took a seat across from her. I received a promotion. They gave it to me after Tom made a mistake. I suppose some congrats are in order. To obtain it, how many people did you have to share a bed with? 3 or 4? Over 4, perhaps, I inquired. I was free to choose who I slept with. I achieved it through sheer effort and my own abilities. Well, I guess you earned it one way or another. There's a dinner tonight in my honor. Will you come? I must have spent 2 hours in my head planning what I was going to say, but in actuality, I barely had 10 seconds. Not a chance in hell. I didn't ask you until this morning because I figured as much. Although I understand why you can't be there, I would still like to see you there. Deb, you're incorrect. I suppose I haven't been the easiest person to live with for the past year. Since you haven't been here, it has been fantastic. You weren't here, so I didn't have to worry about being drunk or not at all when I got home late. You weren't here to say no, so I didn't have to worry about being rejected for bonding. Since you weren't present, the only thing I could alter was how I slept, and I'm now getting decent sleep. Thus, you were in error. Deb, after you've been commended for your excellent work and received a round of applause from everyone, consider this. With their loved one, they will return home, leaving you with nothing but a job to keep you warm. I hope the cost was justified. I rose and made my way back upstairs. To divert my thoughts from Debbie, I engaged in various household tasks. I then made the decision to either get off the pot or crap. I didn't need 5 minutes to assemble it. It required much more thought to write my short letter. Just facts were presented, no beseeching, pleading, or other attempts at reconciliation were made. After showering and getting dressed, I left it on the counter next to her car keys so she would definitely see it before I left. I had no doubt that tonight would be fascinating in a variety of ways. Just before she headed out for her own dinner, Debbie noticed the 2 pieces of paper on the counter. She perused the initial one. To Debbie, you once said to me that you could pass any test in the world. At first, I didn't believe you, but you consistently showed me that you were right. Here's the really good part. The most significant test you will ever take as my wife is on the other sheet. These are the true-false questions, which you claim to be most proficient at. There are only 3 questions, so you should be able to complete it in a few seconds with your expertise and still have time to make dinner. The test is open book and will not be graded on a curve. It is a pass-fail assessment. We can decide whether or not to speak after I grade it when I get home tonight. Dennis, your spouse. She picked up the test and set down the letter. First question, do you still adore Dennis, your husband? Second question, do you believe that your marriage is less significant than your work? Inquiry number 3, are you opposed to getting a divorce? Ellen and I had dinner together. When I told her what I had done, all she did was look at me. You must be joking, right? You simply stopped talking to her and left it there. What would the purpose be? Our marriage is over if she gives the wrong answer to any of them. Hell, not much of it remains at all. I want a loving wife, a family, and a typical marriage. I can even get behind the idea of a dog and a white picket fence. I can't take this any longer, I'm exhausted. I'll at least find out tonight, then. Dennis, you must give me a call when you return home. I can't wait until tomorrow, I can't handle the tension. I have a better idea, how about we work it out together? I smiled at her and said, this way, you'll know the same time as me. We were both aware that the test's outcome would have an ongoing impact on our relationship. I gave her a kiss and she gave me one back as soon as we entered the dark house. I didn't want to look at that pointless test in the kitchen. I was still married, so I couldn't do what I'd wanted to do for months, take Ellen upstairs. After inhaling deeply, we entered the kitchen. Our son was driving me crazy and he just turned 8. I couldn't possibly keep up with him and our daughter. I began to feel older than I had ever felt. Honey, yelled my spouse, there is another one of those socials planned for Saturday. Do you want to go? Do we have to go? I inquired. Not if you don't want to go. I prioritized my family over my career. I informed the children that we would be spending our Saturday at the lake and that we wouldn't return until after 7 o'clock. Although he acknowledged our situation, he wished we could try to attend a few events this year. Babes, he likes you a lot better than me, so the next time he asks, tell him we'll make the Christmas party and his retirement dinner. Honey, he's not retiring for a long time. I acknowledged that. I grinned. I assume you're curious about who I ultimately dated. It made perfect sense. I went into the kitchen with Ellen and turned on the light. When I opened the test, it felt familiar to me once more. Just like that night in my office all those years ago, I didn't even have to grade it. I returned it to the counter. I reached out and held Ellen for what felt like 20 minutes. There were tears in her eyes. After that, I led her upstairs and spent the entire night making love to her. You see, she answered not a single question on the blank paper, just like she did on that essay test all those years ago. You were supposed to give me the right answers to the first and next to the last question, was the only thing she wrote on the note. Without knowing that, I was unable to identify the pattern. You appear to have prevailed this time. Additionally, I had. My comment, do you like a short story like this one? We will never know if it was a full-blown affair or not, but the ending of the marriage was slightly unexpected to me. Comment down below if you agree or not, and I will see you in the next Love TV.